Welcome to the Second Dawn. You're listening to The 100 Podcast, a show about CW's sci-fi series, The 100. I'm Daniel Prime.
Hallowed be his name. And I'm Olga, the One Crew Warrior. Today, we're discussing The 100 Prequel series.
Ooh.
Spoilers.
Yes, so we're a little bit behind on this one, but we're going to talk about some news involving the prequel.
Yeah, maybe there are people who are more behind than we are. Welcome.
So basically, Rothenberg, the showrunner of The 100 and the upcoming prequel, if it happens, he did a bunch of interviews after the prequel came out, or the pilot thing.
The backdoor pilot titled Anaconda.
Yes. Where he sort of talked about, like, this is what I foresee for the prequel. If it gets picked up, these are the kinds of things we want to cover. These are the kinds of plot lines, things like that. So I basically took a bunch of different quotes from a number of different articles, which I'll put in the description, all the articles. Things he's talking about that he wants. Some of them, if the show happens and if they goes the way he's thinking here, are heavy spoilers for what's to come on the show.
Yep.
So that's why we decided to do this as its own sort of spoilery thing.
Instead of including this in our Anaconda review. So if you haven't seen that review, click around.
No, down in the description, we have connects to all of our audio podcasts for our longer one. And also at the end of this, I'll put up the end card of our first reactions to the Anaconda thing. But here we go. We have lots of nice, nifty little quotes from him.
We have some good old quotes.
You'll spit one my way, I'll react to it, and then you'll react to it, and it'll be a good time. Ready?
I don't know if I want to spit anything. So, Jason says, the show is about a band of people who have a cure. In this case, it's radiation immunity. And they're going to try to find as many survivors who are holed up in bunkers or wherever they've been surviving for those 2 very difficult years to cure as many people as they can. It's an almost perfect allegory for the times we're living through. Totally unintentionally.
Yeah, so this is something that we definitely talked about a little bit, but it's great how much, and like crazy how much this prequel feels like it was written for the times we're living in. Yeah. Even though they wrote it and filmed it and everything, I don't know, like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, or whatever. Yeah. We have the Russian virus at the beginning. We have the protests that are well-meaning, and then the cops elevate them.
Escalate.
That's the word. And yeah, the fact that there's people with a cure that are coming to people that are isolated and protected.
And that's what we're hoping for right now, so desperately.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that he says, like, the show overall is about finding more people. So that's very interesting because there's only so many things I can think of off the top of my head of where they would find those people, right? So we talked about are any of the other bunkers from the Second Dawn itself still functioning, or are there going to be other organizations and things like that? Or
private companies, like what Grace says, that people are just trying to get to their bunkers all over the world at that point. Yeah.
Next up.
So he continues, my plan is to go back every episode and do flashbacks regularly to pre-apocalypse Earth. We really want to use the flashbacks as a storytelling device to illuminate characters and show who they were before the apocalypse and how it changed them in a present tense of the story.
Okay, yeah. So I really like this personally. I mean, it's not like shocking, but the idea of having tons of flashbacks to before the apocalypse, because in some ways I'm like just as, if not more, interested in the pre-apocalypse time as I am post-apocalypse.
Because that's a world that we have only seen kind of glimpses of. Like, we have heard tale of Diosa and her freedom fighters. We've heard about Becca's escapades a little bit, but we don't and Josephine going to protest herself and there being like dust storms and things like that. But we haven't really seen everything. We haven't seen the world that they were fighting for. And so much of these characters, like Reese and Callie in particular, like the people that they are after the apocalypse is the people that they had already become before that. So like their personalities and what made them and their relationship, like I want to see those flashbacks.
Yeah. And I think that to me, the reason the pre-apocalypse stuff is so interesting is because that is the stuff that can give us the most like relevant to our lives things, right? And because it's our time, but it's a little bit further down the road and a little bit more messed up. And like, obviously apocalypse time is a cautionary tale in of itself and certainly has things to say about now, but like that has even more to say, I think, and they can really tackle things like the protests and stuff like that, which I think is awesome.
Also, to tie into the 100, I mean, the flashbacks to life on the Ark were some of the best parts of the show in the early seasons. It's how we got to know a lot of our characters and their backstories. So it's nice to continue that kind of way of storytelling too.
Something I think is interesting is it's also a really good way to keep Bill on the show significantly. Even if he went to a different world or whatever, you still get him in his upbringing and how his teachings or how he upbrought them.
Especially since, at least so far in the final season, we're not really seeing Bill interacting with the disciples too much.
We'll see,
even in the prequel, we don't actually see him like talking to people. So
my question still is, if the prequel happens, is it gonna be weird if we see Bill like almost every episode in flashbacks, but then he's not in the present ever? Like it's like building up all this like resentment and issues that he brought up as they grew up, and then not seeing them like directly deal with that, or I don't know. It's interesting.
One could argue it's about dealing with trauma from a parent who's no longer in your life, and you can't like prove to them the person that you've become, or like you can't show them that you've moved past everything that they've done to you. You just kind of have to do it for yourself.
And I think there's definitely going to be things where they parallel, like, oh, he taught us this, or he showed us this, and I hated that he did that, and now I'm doing a similar thing, and how do I feel about that? And
Clark never did things like that. Okay, so speaking of parents, Grace's story will certainly be a huge part of the first episode of the planned prequel, because we know she's got a hazmat suit with limited oxygen and therefore needs nightblood. Her daughter doesn't know that she's out there. Can she get to Callie before the oxygen runs out? When Reese and Callie get together and Callie finds out that Mom was banished by Dad without nightblood, I can envision a version of the story where the two of them together go after their mother, temporarily putting aside their differences in order to save Mom. Whether or not they do, spoiler alert, they will. I feel like it's definitely an important part of the first episode of the season.
So that's really interesting for a few reasons. One is, I mean, there's going to have to be a little bit a suspension of disbelief, I think, for this, because literally they leave and like 5 minutes later, she probably follows them. Like he like maybe 3 minutes later banishes her, and then she stands out there for a minute and a half, and then she puts her suit on and goes up there.
They moved fast. They moved. There's several hundred people just like gunned it.
Well, and especially because Reese he leaves after her, and he'd arrive.
Maybe he's got stellar tracking skills. I don't know. But also they have a fire going, so they're not trying to hide. Like they're trying to get some smoke signals.
There's a little bit of interesting stuff there.
We'll see. We'll see how they handle that.
But more importantly, I'm just fascinated at what an actual pilot would be for this show. Because in a lot of ways, it makes sense for, I would say, like an episode. In my mind, I would have said like an episode 2 to be they go after the mom and work together for that. How do you make a pilot for the show for people who didn't watch the backdoor pilot? How do you make sure that everybody who is entering it for the first time gets everything they need and is almost like
likes these characters, gets on the same page,
and understands the world you're in?
I think you start a flashback that sort of sets up the stuff from before from the protest, maybe. Or I don't know, like you kind of have to probably redo the scene of Callie and her mom going down to the bunker.
I think Reese. You have to. And maybe they do it from a like slightly different point of view. Maybe that is like now it becomes a flashback from Callie instead of like opening the episode or whatever. I'm interested. I haven't watched a lot of shows that had a backdoor pilot and then had a real pilot, so I don't know how they usually work with that stuff. So if you guys know, if you ever watched like the what the heck is that Vampire Diaries spinoff?
The originals.
The originals, I
don't watch that stuff.
So if people watch like the backdoor pilot and then watch the real pilot, how do they sort of balance that stuff?
Great question.
Next up.
All right.
Oh, and I just want to say one thing because I realized it wasn't in the outline. Rothenberg also talked about a few deleted scenes that they had to cut out, and one of them was right before they saw Becca come down, there was a scene where they were going through an abandoned mall, very like Last of Us, seemingly, getting all the stuff and showing a little bit more of the bonding of the kids, which I think would have been great, but obviously time's time. So
yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it's referred to in the episode, but what ended up happening was Callie and Reese were training. Reese was taking it easy on his sister. Dad got in and said, "Take me on, big guy, tough guy." And ultimately, in a sort of jiu-jitsu match with his son, because he refused to tap out, ultimately broke his son's arm. What the fuck are you doing?
What? You love me.
I'm stuck with you. We're in quarantine.
Ultimately broke his arm.
Yeah, ultimately broke his arm, which was the last straw for Mom. Mom left. Callie went with Mom because she had enough and wanted a real life and wanted to sort of experience the world and participate in the protest movements in the streets that were building around the group called Tree Crew.
Yeah. So I thought this was an interesting thing. Another one of those things that, like, it's so interesting because obviously he wants to say as much as he can to get you excited about the show.
Right. That's the point of giving these details away.
At the same time, like, if this does happen, it would have been like really powerful to not know that he was going to break his arm and see. I mean, either way, I feel like they'll make that a really powerful moment.
Yeah. But, I think that's a parent breaking a kid's arm is pretty, visceral.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think they'll pull it off even with.
And I thought that was interesting because we both sort of picked up obviously on some abuse having gone on, but having the confirmation of physical abuse on top of everything else certainly adds a dimension to Reese for sure, especially.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting and touchy, I think, dynamic to watch.
Yep.
Reese's relationship with Bill in particular, because he clearly experienced this abuse. He was the victim here.
And he was the one.
And he's the one who stayed and defended Dad and all of that. So I could see this being a tough watch for some people. And I hope people are able
I think that's a really complex and interesting way to make Reese a three-dimensional character because of obviously how much he felt like he was one-sided. Seeing that backstory gives him a lot of I don't know. Depth.
Yeah. We touched on it a little bit, but it'll be nice to explore that in the prequel.
Yep.
Callie becomes the first Flamekeeper. She's got the flame, and she's protecting it as the episode ends. Thematically, the 100 is all about tribalism and how far you will go to protect yours and what's yours. And Callie is 180 degrees from that. She's all about, as she says in the episode, if she can find them, she will save them. She doesn't care if they're her people. It's just a much more optimistic worldview starting out.
So I thought this was a really nice explanation of the difference between her and I want to say Eliza, her and Clark, because we talked about, like, is she going to be a repeat Clark or whatever?
Right.
And she definitely starts off with a much more, optimistic, like they were saying, like much more like not just my people, everyone matters kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And the quote went on, I think I cut it off maybe a little too early there. The quote went on to sort of talk about how it's interesting to see her start out there and then have to be dealing with tribalism and people who don't see things the way she
does. Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing, is that she wanted to, she was like, there's room for people in the bunker. Yeah. We need to bring them in, save as many people as possible. It doesn't matter that they're not level 12s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, we like you, Callie. You're a good kid. We would see the fractioning of that group into various clans eventually. We would see the way the flame operates before 100 years later, when it came into our story in the original show, when it's not working perfectly anymore because of time and however many minds it now contains. Right now, it only contains the mind of Becca. We have plans to go to a mind space to see Becca when the next person receives the flame. And that will happen as they become the second commander.
So that's cool for sure.
I like this confirmation that Becca is going to be there, is probably going to be more of a presence in the show, really like helping the group.
Yeah, probably like a bit of a Yoda figure, right? Actually, let's talk a little bit more about her as the first Flamekeeper.
Yeah.
So he said that in a few different interviews, right? And so people were talking about, like, who's going to be the first commander? Is she the first Flamekeeper? Blah, 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 blah. So her being the first Flamekeeper sounds like confirmation that she's not the first commander, but one doesn't necessarily preclude the other. But it does seem like if he wanted her to be the second commander, why wouldn't you just do it, right? Why wouldn't Becca just tell her to put it in her head?
Yeah.
So personally, I'm kind of bummed at the idea of her not being the second commander.
Me too.
But it would be interesting that, like, people talk about, could Reese end up being the second commander?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that adds an interesting twist to it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
We will.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I am also slightly disappointed by that, but I'm also willing to go on this journey of the search for the second commander, who is not actually called the commander yet.
I mean, the other question is maybe like Guitar Boy. Because the idea is it's supposed to be that Callie, as the Flamekeeper, is supposed to find someone she believes in or whatever.
Yeah,
so.
Who has good in them, and it'll heighten their already good qualities. Yeah. We know that one crew were in the bunker for years and had no idea that there was a stone in the bunker. So we're going to have to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Where did it go?
Is that all it says?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all you put in.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had this question of like, well, if there was a floaty space rock in the bunker, why wasn't it there when one crew came in?
Yeah, and this is something that people have been asking us in recent episodes of the podcast too. Mm-hmm. It's like, what's up with that? And I think it's helpful that he specifically addresses. Yeah, I'm not just forgetting that, guys.
Right.
And it does seem like this is a prequel issue. So we'll see.
I'm happy to save that mystery for there.
And that does give me a little bit of hope that there's going to be obviously more interaction with the stone, which means maybe Bill will pop back a little bit or something. I don't know. Or that his people might or whatever.
Yes. So speaking of sneaky plans, did you speak of sneaky plans?
I guess.
You spoke of plans.
I am sneaky.
Anyway, Jason has a sneaky plan to get us back up to space because we know that Becca comes down on Unity Day as they're bringing the Ark together. And so up there, we've got the Ark Generation 1 with the ancestors. And I suppose this is a way that we will be using more Easter eggs for the fans of the original show because Clark's great-great-great-grandmother's up there. And Bellamy and O's great-grandpappy Blake is up there.
Yeah, which we've heard tell of Grandpappy Blake.
He had a PhD or he was a genius or something. And Bellamy was a janitor.
What do you think about seeing more of the Ark?
I don't feel like I need it, if I'm being honest.
I think we might be in the minority with this, but I personally feel like it seems like it would be extraneous. That said, I think the next quote is important for this discussion.
Yes, it is about another character who also got cut out. Mm-hmm. Got out of the show. No. There was another character. She got so cut out, unfortunately, for time. But her dream was to go to space. And of course, that dream got shattered by the apocalypse. In season 1, because we're going to need to manufacture more Nightblood, we're going to see her finding a way to get to space. And that allows us to go up to that world.
So that is the thing that makes me more interested, is if there's going to be crossover, then I'm more interested. The main thing I've always had an issue with the idea of showing early Ark stuff is I don't want it to feel like we're watching two separate shows.
Yeah.
Because the reason it worked in season 1 of the actual 100 is because eventually they smashed together and they were affecting each other directly. And
So here's the difficult thing that I guess they'll have to balance is if there's interaction between the two, then won't people on the Ark know that the Earth is survivable if you have Nightblood? And if they're going up to like manufacture more Nightblood, why not just give everyone in space Nightblood? They're all brilliant genius scientists, and then have them come down and have them lead your on the ground.
I would be surprised if Jason didn't already have an answer to that.
I really hope he does.
That seems like the kind of thing that he already has an answer to. Like,
I'm sure.
It's easier to explain that to me than some of the other things.
I see that. Maybe there's only like a couple of people from that they're like interacting with.
Or maybe it's a cover up where they don't want people to go down yet or something.
But the thing is that I don't know if I want to be watching that, and I'm perfectly fine being in the minority of like, I don't know if I need the mystery of like how this falls apart.
Yeah.
Just to like, because I'll know that they never make it, like whatever plans that they might have or whatever things that they might want to be doing, I'll be like, but they don't. But they don't go back to Earth until the main show.
I mean, maybe some of them do, and that's how we got so many Grounders, and then somehow that got taken out of the history books. I don't know.
I don't know.
Like, I agree with you. This is one of those classic, like, why I don't care about prequels things.
Yeah.
Where it's like we know how this ends. Like,
yeah.
But, like, you know, I liked this episode, so maybe
I'll
I'm
go
wrong.
out on a limb for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm just saying that of all of the things that the prequel could be doing, I don't personally feel like I'm missing out on seeing the arc.
How do you feel about Mount Weather? Because I know there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to see Mount Weather.
I don't think I need that either because we know they stay down there
for quite a while until they go, until Dante's a little boy.
I guess I'd be interested-ish in how they start, like, taking grounders, I guess, or like maybe that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we know that whatever, like, if there's ever a fight to try to stop them, we know that people lose because they keep doing
My biggest issue is, like, my biggest issue with showing the Mountain Men is the Mountain Men are never as interesting as they are on the 100.
Yeah.
Like, that is clearly when they're the most interesting because it's when they have a chance to permanently go outside. It's when they have their biggest enemy and they're fighting in a huge war. Like, I just think, and when, I don't know, maybe they could prove me wrong, but to me, that's where the most stakes are and most interesting stuff is. And seeing the origins of that particularly don't super interest me.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's like, if they had like a one-off episode somehow.
Like special guest, Baby Dante. Yeah.
I don't know. Prove me wrong.
Yeah. I'd be fine, I guess, with seeing that, but I'd kind of rather new territory.
Yeah.
Even in a prequel.
Yeah.
And this last thing isn't exactly a direct quote, but it's from one of the articles. It says, Rothenberg also noted that the fact that Callie and her mother are Black will inform some of the storytelling going forward, and that the writers designed Callie and her brother Reese to be just about as different from Bellamy and Octavia Blake as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's address the first part of that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So first, one thing I wanted to say is I don't think I found like a perfect quote to pull out, but he talked about how on the 100, they have a lot of things where they, you know, include diversity, whether it be sexuality or race or whatever. And it's supposed to be like a post-racial, post-sexuality, well, I should say,
a very evolved,
post-homophobia, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But in this show, especially in the flashbacks to pre-apocalypse, it's not that way.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's going to be more similar to the world that
we're in
currently find ourselves in.
Yeah, and so I think that he very specifically chose to make the leads people of color for that reason, to actually talk about what they go through. I love these actors they picked.
Yeah,
and
great casting.
I think it's a great thing that they picked them. I want to know, especially from our people of color audiences out there, how do you feel? Like, what do you want from that, and how do you feel about Rothenberg tackling this? Because he's had a rocky relationship with depicting people of color.
Yeah.
Clearly, he wants diversity in his shows.
Yes.
He just isn't necessarily always the best person to do it.
Yeah. My hope is that he's not just going to pay lip service to this, and that his writer's room will reflect the casting choices that he's made, and that he's going to have, people of color who can, write these stories from places that they understand instead of just, representation for the sake of representation's sake without actual like engagement with these communities. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I think that's especially relevant. I don't know if people have seen the thing from the guy who plays Miller on the show recently, had a thing talking about how he felt like he was tokenism on the show. I'm the black gay man. Yeah. And I'm just standing here with a gun. Yeah. And so there's definitely a lot of feelings about that. And I'd like to hear people, if you have a perspective about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yes.
There was something else.
The second part of the quote was about making sure that Reese and Callie's relationship was very different from Bellamy and Octavia's. Yeah. Yeah, I think they've already kind of put that in motion. They don't seem to be like, so-and-so is my responsibility. Yeah. They're very much like, I'm responsible for myself and these other people. Screw you. I love you, but also...
I do think it's going to be... it would be a tricky line to make sure it didn't feel like you're retreading territory too much. Yeah. But I am excited to see that. It's also interesting to think about, like, in the 100, they were very specifically the only siblings, whereas in this, they don't have to be. And so it would be kind of interesting to also see other kind of dynamics going on, too.
And I think it's worth noting that both Octavia and Bellamy came from a very, I made the janitor joke before, but like they were from the lowest class on the arc, whereas Callie and Reese are the children of the savior.
Children.
Yeah, like they're about as high class as it comes on this show. So therefore, we have that class dynamic that's going to, I think, play a part.
Well, still, having waves in that, like we were talking about with the abuse and all that stuff.
And the fact that I think their race is also going to play a major role in it. So it's this thing of privilege in some ways, but not in other ways. Yeah.
All right, so that's basically what we have for right now. I'm still, holding out hope there that we get this prequel to actually get picked up.
I really hope so.
Yeah.
CW, HBO Max, come on through, someone.
Yeah, I really hope it works out. It didn't do as great numbers as the Arrow backdoor pilot, and word is that it's sort of battling out between the two of them, which one it's going to go for.
Interesting.
The thing, there's a big difference in that, like, this came out during the summer. Arrow already had bigger numbers, but also there are already like 17 Arrowverse shows on there right now. And if they want to have a little bit of diversity in their programming, plus the Arrow spinoff comes with more expensive actors than the show does. So who knows? Hoping for the best. Let us know what you think about all this stuff in the comments down below. And stay tuned for, I believe we're aiming for this coming Monday. It will be our season 5 and 6 rewatch reviews. And then, that Wednesday is our first reactions to episode 10 as it comes back and we get out of this hiatus.
Oh, it's been a rough 2 weeks, everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And may we meet again.
May we meet again.